Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manoj Agarwal, and today we'll be talking with my friend Aaron Poynton. So Aaron is the CEO and founder of Omnipoynt Solutions, a consulting firm that specializes in 4IR technology strategy and business development within the aerospace and defense, national security, and health and safety sectors. He's also the co-founder and chief commercial officer of A3 Global, a visionary company focused on the future of mobility within the circular economy. Aaron's journey is remarkable. He began his career serving in the US Army, where he achieved the rank of captain in elite units. Following his military service, he transitioned to the corporate world, leading global commercial teams at Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 technology companies. After more than a decade in the corporate sector, Aaron embraced entrepreneurship, founding multiple successful companies and nonprofits. His ventures have taken him to over 50 countries, driving billions in revenue. Dr. Poynton is not only an accomplished entrepreneur, but also a dedicated scholar. He holds a doctorate and three master's degrees in business, law, and political science. His contributions extend beyond business. He is Fulbright specialist and board member of the United Nations Association of America, Washington, D.C. Additionally, Aaron is the founding member and vice chair of the American Society for AI. As a contributor to Forbes.com and a member of the Forbes Business Council, Aaron's insights are highly valued in the business community. He's also a USA Today and Wall Street Journal's best-selling author, currently working on an exciting new book set to be released in 2024. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good to see you. And one quick update on my bio. Today is actually launch day for my book. It officially launched today. So it'll be available today on Amazon.
That's awesome. That's an honor that you are here on your book launch. Congratulations.
First podcast as well. So I told you I would save it for you.
Nice. All right. So let's dive in. You have accomplished so much, how many, one doctorate and three master's degrees, and when did you start learning? When you were 12, or you are so young and accomplished so much? So I really want us to dive deep into your history, your life journey, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you. I don't feel like I'm young these days, but I guess I am for as much as I've done. And your listeners and watchers must be saying, "Oh my God, what is wrong with this guy? 4 degrees." I mean, most people hate school, but I found a real passion in it, and I actually didn't start school until a little bit later. When I graduated from high school, I took a break. I took a few gap years. I knew eventually I wanted to go to school and that I love learning, but I was more interested in really just learning about the world and seeing places and traveling. And so the best way to do that, of course, is for a young person with little experience and little education and little to contribute, is to join the military. So I followed in the footsteps of my father and my grandfather and a long line of Army soldiers. In fact, I've got one of the flags back there from my grandfather who's passed away. And I took a few years off and I traveled the world. This was the mid 90s when I enlisted in special operations. And, like most young kids, you kind of want to travel the world and do fun stuff. And then what happened right away, we went into Bosnia. And so I was literally in my basic, training in 1995 when Bill Clinton came on TV and said that we were going to Bosnia and we were going to be there for a year, if you remember that. But so I went to Bosnia and spent nearly a year there. That was my first deployment and had a wonderful time. But I knew I wanted to go to school. I'm a very curious person. And when I was over there, I applied for an Army ROTC scholarship. And I found out when I got back to the States that I had been awarded that. So I took a little bit of a break and I went to school, went to University of Maryland, UMBC, where I got my first degree, which was a bachelor's in economics. And then after that, I just, when I sort of came to the conclusion of wrapping up one degree, because I'm a very curious person and very ambitious as well, I kind of said, okay, well, what did I learn in the course of this program that really sort of sparks an interest in me, and that I was very curious about, and what sort of a next program that I can do to continue learning. And I did a number of different programs, including very experiential programs. I'm not the type of person that just wants to sit in a classroom and learn. I like to absorb things. So one of the coolest programs that I did was I went and did an executive global MBA at Duke University. And that actually got to take me to, I think, 7 or 8 different countries over the course of about 2 years. And each country we visited, we would spend about 2 weeks there. So the whole business school would pick up, and we would go, take over a hotel. So you were learning during the day, and then in the afternoon, you were visiting factories and you were visiting businesses. And then in the evening, you would go out to the restaurants and you would enjoy the local food and culture. So we went to some really interesting places like India,
Oh, nice.
Kazakhstan,
Mhm.
Turkey, China, all throughout Latin America, and just continued to do that a few times. So ended up with a doctorate and a law degree and 2 additional master's degrees. So
Amazing, amazing. Now, obviously, as you said, you are a very curious person, very ambitious as well, and you have done some amazing things. We'll talk about that. But tell me one thing. I'm always curious about this. How did your travels shape you as a human? How did it help you in your career? Because I find that fascinating.
I really believe that there's no better thing that a person can do to help them grow, not only in their professional life, but in their personal life as well, really deep down inside, than to travel.
Mhm.
So when I was growing up, I didn't have the opportunity to travel internationally a lot, but I knew I kind of almost kept a mental checklist of all the places I wanted to go and all the things I wanted to do. And when I had the opportunity to do that, either through military service or through the corporate world or on my own, I took every opportunity I could. And I will say that nothing opens your eyes up bigger to this world than travel. And when I say travel, I don't necessarily mean, and I've done this before on business trips, and you've probably been there,
Mhm.
airplane, car, hotel,
Yeah,
hotel,
yeah,
car, airplane, right?
yeah.
But I try wherever I go to extend for a day or two at least, maybe a couple days, maybe a week in some cases, and really just sort of get out in town and go meet
Mhm.
people and talk to people and experience what it's like to be there. And I love different. I found that I love different cultures. The world is a very, very diverse place, and I'm trying to instill that in my kids as well, getting them going as young as possible. I've got 3 little kids, and we're doing a trip this December to UAE, to
Oh,
Dubai and
nice,
Abu
nice,
Dhabi,
nice.
right? So trying to get them involved with travel as well. But I really I have enjoyed it, every aspect of it, and not
Mhm.
just the business aspect, but I have made lifelong friends throughout my travels. And I joke around, that, in my neighborhood where I live, I would struggle to find, 2 or 3 people to go to dinner with tonight. But if you drop me in any single city, anywhere around the world, I'll pull up WhatsApp,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I'll have 2 or 3 people in that random city that I would love to go to dinner with, who I have a strong, connection with through my travels.
That's awesome. And now coming back to your book, it's a very interesting title. I'll let you reveal it, but it also reflects your personality in many ways, right? Like I have spent time with you, we hung out, and you are somebody uh, who does not follow convention, from what I can say. So, can you speak about that, and then tell us a little bit about your book as well, and how that all relates to each other?
Sure. Well, the book, which I've been working on for a couple of years now, it's called Think Like a Black Sheep: Unlock Your Inner Superpower and Break Free from the Crowd. This is a book that I had an idea about a couple of years ago. And what really sparked the idea was a book that I read as a child and maybe you've read it. It's a very popular book in the field of statistics, right? So when you say popular in the field of statistics, people are rolling their eyes. Oh my God, there's a popular book in statistics. But in 1954,
Mhm.
there was a man named Darrell Huff who
Mhm.
wrote a book called How to Lie with Statistics. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Right. And so it was a very fun and whimsical book to read. You could read the entire, it's only that thick. You could read the entire book in an afternoon. It had funny cartoons in it, and he was actually not a statistician. He was just a freelance writer.
Mhm.
And the book wasn't really a book about how to lie with statistics. I mean, he went through how people lied with statistics, but it was really meant to caution people about how other people lie with statistics and how you can protect yourself through this.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that I think combined with my natural curiosity. I've taken the Myers-Briggs personality indicator. I am an ENTJ, but
Mhm.
most important about that classification is that I'm a mere 1.3% of the population out of all the
Mhm. Mhm.
16 different types. So I like to question things. I like to challenge things. And reading that book and then going out and traveling and just living in the world, the business world, just being a member of society, watching the news, listening to politicians, it made me really start to question every single thing that I heard. And
Mhm.
what I found is that when you start to peel the layers of the onion and you start to look at some of these narratives that are out there, they fall apart pretty quickly. And I found that a lot of people, because of these cognitive biases that we have, are very subject and vulnerable to things like conformity and
Mhm.
groupthink. And
Mhm.
people just sort of go along to get along.
Yes, yes.
Um, and I saw that really, really play out. So I had this book idea even before COVID. And then, as you know, COVID changed everything. I say in my book that it was probably the biggest malpractice of numbers and sort of information that we've had in a very long time. And it really opened up my eyes to, well, if this is possible over COVID, well, what else is possible? And I really wanted to challenge people to start questioning what's behind the numbers, questioning why things are happening, questioning the narrative. And in my book, I am quite critical of some of the big organizations that exist that create and shape narratives for people to follow, including government, including big businesses, and including the media. And so in my book, I call them the shepherds,
Mhm. Mhm.
shepherds of the sheep. And so you
Mhm.
are to be the black sheep, not the white sheep that are following conformity. But
Yeah.
really, that's just a message that you can take to any aspect of your life. And if you look throughout history, and do you remember that Apple commercial from back in the day, where they talked about being different?
Yeah,
And,
of course. Yeah.
it was a very famous Apple commercial. And if you think about it, how many people do you remember today that really stuck with you, that really changed the world? Right? We're white sheep.
Yeah.
How many people really got in line and did what they were told to do versus they had the bravery and the courage to be able to do something different.
Yeah.
Now, by all means, some people are going to listen to this and, probably do something irresponsible and say, well, I was being a black sheep. I mean, obviously, there's a balance here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Between being responsible and being a good person and challenging the status quo versus just going along. And where you draw that line, it's really an individual choice based on a number of different things, like your risk profile, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is absolutely. I also believe the same thing. Like going against the grain is when you can make impactful changes. But it, as you said, takes a lot of courage because we are always afraid to stand out. That's just human nature, right? Um,
It
Now,
is.
can you give us a few examples of some interesting things that you have learned along the way, and some of the maybe a preview of the book, like because I know you have lots of interesting stories, and you have a really good knack of explaining things in interesting ways. So, anything that you want to share?
Sure. I'll say for starters that the book does have a lot of stories in it. It's really meant to be a poolside read, right, by the average person with no really background or experience in statistics and numbers, and nor is the book just solely about statistics and numbers. There's a number of things that we discuss in there as far as cognitive biases and things like that that you really just need to think about because it affects your everyday. So, I mean, there's a number of different things in there that I think your readers and your watchers will find interesting. One of the things that I do is I talk about how decisions are made, whether we use what's called system one thinking or system two thinking, which are maybe sort of can be described as more innate, intuitive thinking versus more deliberate, thoughtful, analytical thinking, and how, what type of thinker are you, and what are the pros and the cons of these different types of thinking, and how you can think differently knowing that you're a system one or a system two type of thinker. The other thing that we go through is what are cognitive biases, and these are cognitive biases that we all have. And what do we have that's built into us through just millions of years of evolution that impacts our decision making today? One of the things that you mentioned a minute ago was that we're afraid to go against the grain. Well, as you'll read in the book, there's a reason for that. That is deeply embedded in our evolution. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because that has kept us alive for
Yeah.
a very long time, by being essentially part of the tribe where we look out for each other,
Yeah.
right? And generally speaking, throughout history, human beings have lived in communities of about 150 people. So that's the number of people that any human can really develop meaningful relationships with, right? So think about it. You only have so much time and so much energy and so much patience, right? And so in today's fast-paced world where everyone looks at how many followers they have, thousands or millions of followers, I mean, that's not real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You still have a handful of really close friends, and if you count them out, you probably have no more than 150 people
Yeah. Exactly.
that you know really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the things, I say in the book that it's, these biases aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they are something that if you're aware of them and in the right places, in the right conditions, and in the right decisions, you can overcome, some of these biases. One common one is confirmation bias, right? And confirmation bias is essentially where you seek out information that already supports whatever preconceived notion you may have on a topic. And this is very important in the digital age and in the age of AI. And so one big difference between Huff's book, which was written in 1954, and my book is a whole lot has changed in the world since
Yeah.
1954. We
Absolutely.
have more information now at our fingertips that we can instantly have access to than the culmination of every library book put together in 1954. And so information has really become a commodity, right? Information is no longer a scarce thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but what has become important and what has become a differentiator is what do you do with that information? We have so much information now that we have access to that all of this information cannot be comprehended by the average, even the best human brain. So what do? We take this information and these data sets and these studies, right? And all of this information, whether it's a a marketing promotion or a politician trying to sell you on whatever their agenda is, or government trying to compel you to do something, whether it's get a COVID shot or get an EV car, like whatever it is, right? You boil it down to a summary snapshot using a statistic, right? And from there, it gets boiled down even further to a headline. And guess what? As a study that was done showed that the average headline and the average article for most consumer articles is actually written at a 7th grade level. You're taking these very complex things and all of this information and distilling it down to one data point, and then distilling that down to one headline that could be read by a 7th grader, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is the average attention span these days is so short that we very, very rarely ever have the time to look into something and to get both sides of something, and to make an informed decision. So what do? We look at a headline, we find where that headline fits into whatever preconceived notion that we have with confirmation bias. And then we go tweet that headline out to 500 more people, and it spreads through the internet like that. Right? And this is a whole nother story about misinformation and disinformation, which I go into a little bit in the book. But boiling it down to business, right? And how you can take some of these lessons and make better decisions. I mean, one thing that I talk about a little bit is authority bias, right? And so authority bias is the prevalence of people who follow other people because they are perceived to be an authority. They either are an authority figure or they're perceived to be an authority figure. And we see this a lot, with if it's a doctor, for example, giving medical advice, you're going to believe them. Or even if it's not a doctor, but they play a doctor on TV and they're wearing the doctor outfit, right? But in the business world, how you look and how you dress in particular, we found really plays into authority bias. And there was one study that was done that was referenced in my book, where there's a number of people standing at a street corner and they had the do not walk sign, and a well-dressed man in a fitted suit and tie walks across the street, and all of the other people behind him also walked across the street. Why? Because they felt comfortable, like he was leading and he was an authority. He was perceived to be an authority figure by the way he walked and the way he dressed. They ran the same experiment with a poorly dressed person walking across the street, and no one followed them, right? Very, very simple exercise. But if you take that into the business world, you have to be competent as well, because people will see through it. But if you look the part and you dress well and you present yourself well, people will be more inclined to follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are great points. Obviously, as a student of psychology, I have dived deep into these kind of things. So, but the examples you are bringing up, they are fascinating. My question will be, how do you overcome these biases? Like, how do you, if it's so ingrained in us with millions of years of evolution, are we just a victim to this, or is there a way to get over it?
Well, I think, as I said before, they're not necessarily bad things, but you have to be aware of them. I mean, how bad could it be if it's kept us alive for so long, right? The problem is that a lot of these innate characteristics that we have developed over a very, very long time period, right? But the world today, especially with technology, is just changing so fast that our bodies and our minds cannot just readapt that quickly. So I'm not sure that you're going to be able to overcome them. But what I do in my book is I make people aware of them. And
Mm-hmm.
I give lots and lots of different examples of where they have played out for the good and how they've played out for the bad. And it's really more about understanding sort of view how you view risk, how you view yourself, how you view others, and how you fit into the world. And sort of just being comfortable in your own skin to be able to make some of these decisions and just to be aware of uh, of what type of person you want to be. But the premise of the book is to have the courage to be uncomfortable, have
Mm-hmm.
the courage to be able to challenge the status quo, have the courage to be able to speak up when you're not sure you're right and you're not sure that your opinion is going to be a popular opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found through some of my studies and talking with other folks and even being in this position is if you say something that you think may be unpopular or may go against the narrative or may go against the grain, odds are you're not the only one that's thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Other people likely are as well, but they're too afraid to stand up. They're too afraid to voice the contrary opinion. But what you find is that as soon as somebody does, the other people who felt the same way and feel the same way will now be a little bit more empowered and emboldened that they have a leader for their voice. And they'll come behind you and you'll find that maybe you weren't as small of a minority of that thought as you thought that you were. The other people think similar things, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. All
And
right.
I will say just
Yeah.
as a bit of background, the so this all in throughout the book, Think Like a Black Sheep, I take all of these stories that I've gotten, not just from the business world, but also from my time in the military, where I did psychological operations in the U.S. Army, working overseas, where our job was to win the hearts and the minds
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
people, combined with some of the political campaigns that I've worked on, where all you're trying to do is to influence people to give you a vote, combined with some of the marketing some of the marketing departments that I've run at companies big and small, where again you're trying to persuade people to buy your product. Life, every aspect of life, no matter what it is, you're either trying to persuade someone to do something or you're the one on the receiving end, right?
Correct, correct, correct.
Being persuaded. And the point of the book is that sometimes uh, companies, politicians, governments know of these biases that we have, and they can take advantage of them,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So don't believe everything on the first pass.
Absolutely.
Dig a little deeper.
That's great advice. Now let's talk about AI, because you mentioned that information is everywhere, but now we are adding one more layer of advancement in technology, which, in my opinion, is one of the biggest sort of inventions created by humans. How do you think the world will be shaped by AI now moving forward?
Well, I mean, this is probably the fourth or fifth big revolution in technology that we've seen in just a short period of time in my lifetime. Everything from the PC to the internet to cloud to mobile, and AI is the next big one. And I think AI has the potential to be the biggest and the most disruptive. I do think that AI is in its infancy. And most people don't really even know what AI is, but I think everyone can relate to Chat GPT, but AI is way bigger than that.
Mhm.
The challenge that we have with AI when it comes to some of the issues in my book is increasingly we won't know what is real
Mhm.
and what's not real. So up until this point, for example, if you go back to 1954 when Huff wrote his book,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
The odds of you going and finding a piece of information in a library that was fictitious, that was sort of coming off as real, was extremely low. right?
Mm-hmm.
In more recent years, we found that technology has enabled nefarious people to create images that aren't real, to create storylines that aren't real. And it's more than just an image or a storyline sometimes. I mean, you can create an entire campaign around it using different types of technology. But image is very powerful. When I talk about this and think like a black sheep, if there's a story that's fake, and there's an image like a graph or a chart that goes along with it, because we're very visual people, because that's how we've evolved. Just like dogs have great sense of smell, humans have evolved with a great sense of vision, and most
Yeah.
of our brain's processing power is devoted towards vision.
Mm-hmm.
But when you marry those two together, or whether it's an image, a fake image, the odds that a person seeing that believes it to be true is exponentially higher than if it did not include the image. So we are very vulnerable to visual manipulation. But what's happened just over the past year or two, let's think back, for example, to the last election cycle 4 years ago. The ability to make fictitious, deep fake synthetic images was there, but it required a little bit of skill. Not the average person couldn't do it. And then when they did it, you were able to see some of the slight nuances, whether it was a weird shadow or something that was distorted, that where the human brain is actually pretty good about picking these sorts of things out, right? Fast forward now, within about 45 minutes after the attempted assassination of President Trump, the
Yeah.
first synthetic fake images started to come out. And now it's not just images, it's images, it's videos, it's voice, it's all of that. And they are nearly indistinguishable from the real images. So the
Yeah.
big challenge we're going to have moving forward is when you're trying to be a black sheep and you're trying to sort of peel things apart and understand really what's real and to make better decisions for you and your business and your family. The question is going to be, how do you know if it's real or not? That's the
Yeah.
big challenge we're going to have with AI.
Nice. Well, it's going to be quite interesting to see how everything plays out. It has been very interesting conversation as always. Now, before I let you go, and tell us where can people find your book, and if they want to reach out, they want to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Absolutely. The book is called Think Like a Black Sheep. It was released today. It's available at all major retailers. We're running a special for the first week. You can buy the electronic version of the book for 99 cents. And the best way to reach out to me is through LinkedIn, Aaron Poynton.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes so that people can reach out easily. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom, your experience. It was a really, really insightful conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.